How's it going, everyone? Nick from Comic Culture here. It's time for Nick at Night, my weekly non-spoiler comic book review show. Just got done reading the few books that I got this week, so let's go over each and every one of them right now. So I'm going to go ahead and put up my grading scale right here. The way this works is after I go over a book, I'm going to put that cover on the grading scale so you can see how this week's picks stack up against each other. So let's go into the big two as we always do. We're going to start in DC. It's the only DC book that I picked up this week. It's Lazarus Planet Legends Reborn issue number 1. So I got this one because apparently this is the first cover appearance and maybe first appearance of this character on here. I think his name is City Boy, which is actually a really stupid name for this character. It's an anthology series. There's a ton of writers on this, a ton of artists on here. There's a lot of different short stories in here. I'm trying to think if there's any of them that really stuck out to me. We have like the commissioner. She's like being the Question right now, and so she's kind of living a double life in the one issue. That was okay. We have a Raven issue in here too, a Raven story with Beast Boy. That was okay too. She's kind of dealing with her own demons and trying to, help supernaturally in the area because we have this Lazarus rain coming down right now that's doing all kinds of crazy stuff in Gotham. And so she's doing her best to kind of keep control of the demons that are spawning out of this, which is an interesting bit in itself. But I think the main reason people might be getting this book is because of this character right here. Very interesting power set. They have a way of finding lost treasures, and their powers get amplified because of this Lazarus rain. Now, this character does run into some Bat family members, and there's some little small chaos and stuff like that ensues inside this issue. Art's not too bad. We don't really know a lot about this character. They have somewhat of a moral compass, but like their power set leads them to be a little bit dishonest. And so we'll see how it goes from there. After that, though, we have another story with Firestorm, and he's kind of dealing with his own problems right now with, like the split personality and things like that. And there's this villain that they tackle in this issue, and a revelation about how he shares, how that power is shared between the two people to form their Firestorm. So it's okay. It's not like required reading at all. None of the stories blew me away. If you're getting it for the spec for this first character here, great. Just keep it and we'll see where this character goes. But we'll get a proper introduction later this year to this character. So it was okay. Maybe a pass though. All right, we're going to dive into some Marvel books real quick. We're going to start with Moon Knight from Jed MacKay, issue number 20. And the beginning of this book starts out pretty intense. Man, it's really intense. We basically have all these different people, all these informants that have worked with Moon Knight over the years being assassinated all at the same time in like this real coordinated attack. And so Moon Knight and his whole team are trying to get together, figure out what these people have in common, and then predict who the next who the next victims are going to be of this mysterious attacker. So it's pretty cool to see, them trying to plot out and trying to figure out what's going on and who's on the list and who's not. And then seeing if they can intervene in time. And we got some amazing art in here too. We got Hunter's Moon, we got Tigra in here, and it's a pretty cool little issue. It's like a race against the clock. Now, does it feel a little bit like out of place in this universe and in this story right now? Yeah, this kind of came out of left field, which was okay. It was okay. It was an interesting enough issue, but when I'm trying to look at the grand scheme of things, I'm like, where does this exactly fit? And we get a little bit of that answer with some of the villains that are held responsible for the action that they uncover towards the end of the book. The back end of the story, the backstory in here is Blade related. So it goes over some of the history between the Fist of Khonshu and Blade in general. Maybe not Mark Spector's Moon Knight character, but a previous one, which I thought was pretty cool. The art shifts in there too, so it has this real like 70s vibe to it. So I think that's really awesome. It's like a modern take on an older comic, and I'll give you a little taste of what that looks like here as well. So it definitely shifts art-wise, but it mirrors that old classic feel, which is pretty cool. And I think it's a great thing to do at this point because Blade's going to be invading the universe here pretty soon, and what better book to do that than in Moon Knight when he's fighting a bunch of vampires and stuff like that. So if you're looking for a good book to get into the Blade stuff, pick up Moon Knight issue number 20, and then you can get into Bloodline, which is our next book coming up. So like I said, we have Bloodline, Daughter of Blade issue number 1 that came out as well. This is that hype book that we were introduced to back in the Free Comic Book Day issue when we kind of saw what she would look like, and we had a little side story about that. I need to go back and read that one because I completely forgot everything about that book, but This one was pretty cool. It's from Danny Lore, and we're touching base on Blade's daughter, and Blade's apparently is like his ex-wife. And it's just, they're kind of like run-of-the-mill people. You know, they're just kind of living their life. She's going to school, mom's working, things like that. Dad's not around. And there's a little bit of an awakening of power in her life right now. And it's brought out in this really intense situation in an alleyway after mom and daughter go out for the evening. So they encounter some big threat. They take care of the threat. And then all of a sudden, all these secrets start being revealed. The daughter was holding back some stuff. Mom was holding back some stuff. And they're exploring this together. You know, I will say it's an interesting take on an origin story. It's a little bit different than we typically see. At least it feels like that way. It was written a little bit different. It wasn't like this daughter's sitting back and she's brooding and nobody understands me and all this kind of stuff. It didn't play like that. So it has this real interesting vibe to it, this feel. I think the art could have been way better, and the execution of like her powers coming out could have been better too. But, you know, it is what it is, you know, so we'll see where it goes from there. A little twist at the end, introduced to a mysterious character. And there's a lot of questions, of course, that come out of that. So we'll see where that goes as well. And then we do get a quick Blade cameo towards the end, leading in an interesting direction. So this was a pretty fun book. You know, spec wise, sure, pick it up if you're into her, but I think it's going to set up a cool trajectory for Blade in this, you know, modern time. So I'd recommend picking this one up for sure. All right, next Marvel book we read this week was Miles Morales Spider-Man issue number 3. And this is pretty much like issue number 1 and number 2. If you enjoyed those issues, I think you're going to like this one. We're still teaming up with Misty Knight, taking on like these enhanced supervillains. They have someone that's supplying them extra tech to really upgrade all their stuff. So all the normal tricks that we use to take out Scorpion or whoever just aren't working as well as they did in the past. And so someone's to blame. We get introduced to that character and a little bit about their backstory as well inside of here. And so we do get some context about who's been messing around in Miles's life and who's kidnapped some of his friends as well. So we do get some of those answers inside this book, which is really fun. I'll show you some of the amazing artwork in here. This book is incredibly well drawn and colored, and you get some awesome battle scenes, really kinetic energy right there. And I'm loving all that visual candy inside this book. The origin story for this villain is kind of meta in a way, because as they're talking about their origin story, they're kind of like, yeah, I know a lot of people had it rough, but I had it extra rough or something like that. And so, you know, it's kind of like what the reader's thinking. It's like, oh, another person that was not paid attention to or didn't have the opportunities they needed or something like that. And they actually call it out inside this issue, which I thought was pretty funny because it's exactly what I was thinking when I was reading this book. I'm like, oh, kind of a woe is me situation. But we get a cool introduction to the character. It's not spoilery at all. We've been seeing this character a little bit here and there. But again, some awesome 2-page spreads, which really help tell the story. And yeah, it's a cool little proper introduction, I guess, to this character. So if you're looking for a proper introduction, maybe first appearance on the cover, who knows? This might be the book for you. It's pretty fun. If you're into some Spider-Man stuff, I would check out Miles Morales. It's been a good ride so far. All right, the last Marvel book we read this week was Silver Surfer Ghostlight issue number 1 from John Jennings. And this is a book that I picked up on the whim because it was a pretty light week. And I loved this cover with Silver Surfer flying in with like Galactus hanging out in the background. I thought that was really awesome. So at least it was a cover buy. I flipped through the interior art to just check out the interior art while I was at the shop, and I wasn't really blown away by it. It seems pretty, you know, maybe lacking detail. Maybe the color scheme is a little bit too, you know, broadish and, you know, not really detailed. But I wanted to check it out, just see what it had in store. I noticed that it picked up a little bit on the action side towards the end, and so I read through it. Now, I was actually pleasantly surprised because there's not a whole lot that goes on in this book until the very, very end, but the pacing and the interaction and the characters that they introduced throughout the story were really engaging, and it was really fun. And I just enjoyed the pacing of this, even if it's just this blah, you know, here's some kids hanging out with grandma while mom and dad go out on a date kind of stuff. Don't get in trouble. We're living in your uncle's house who's disappeared mysteriously, and he's pronounced dead, but they never found a body. And this daughter's having all these weird nightmares or these dreams about this weird glowing man in the backyard. And they kind of get into some trouble around that once mom and dad head out and grandma goes to bed. So it is kind of, you know, fun to see these kids get into some trouble, and they actually call down and they actually release some kind of an energy and get the attention of a lot of big, strong, powerful people, both on Earth and from afar. So I can imagine we're going to be exploring this a little bit more as we go. We do get a little Silver Surfer action in here as well. We get this character here that I'm not personally familiar with, but we learn how this person was kind of resurrected in a way inside of this story. And we had some awesome little spreads towards the back of this book. So I had no expectations for this book at all. It was interesting. I liked the pacing, the characters. Wasn't really action-packed until the very end. Art was okay, but it worked in some of the more cosmic scenes and when our superheroes were revealed. So I would check this one out if it was a light week for you. All right, we're going to dip into some indie books. We're going to start over in Image Comics with Almighty issue number 1. And this was a pretty interesting book. This is actually written and drawn by Edward LaRoche. If I'm not pronouncing that right, I apologize. It gives you a little explanation of what the world is like at this time. I think the time is now 2098, but around 2055, the world kind of went to hell. We had all this civil war going on, and this gigantic wall was developed, kind of separating the country, and then everything kind of went to hell after that. But we do pick up in 2099, and it says, a girl has been abducted, and a killer is hired to find her and bring her home. So that's kind of what we get right here. We're introduced to this one lady who was kidnapped and kind of held prisoner by these weird, almost like cannibal-esque madman kind of a thing. And so the first part of this book is about her escaping from her abductees, and she eventually gets rescued by this real violent, mysterious woman who's a hired killer. And we get to know her a little bit more in this book as well. And since this is like a post-apocalyptic era and everything's real, nasty and everything like that, gnarly, we do have some cool artwork in here with some interesting coloring as well that kind of puts you in that mood for sure. And then as we get introduced to some more of our characters here, they take on that gruesome look as well. So they actually look like they're raiders or something like that, which I think is pretty good in these kinds of apocalyptic style books right here, to get that aesthetic right, to get that color scheme right, and to get that character design right. So I think they did a really good job there as well. So I would imagine this is going to be a story about this hired killer who's saving this girl, and they're going to be on the road trying to escape not only the people that originally took her, but whoever else that they run across through their journey back wherever home might be. Another good thing they did in this book too was introducing a lot of different characters, and it kind of sets the stage for how this world is perceived and how the different people are acting inside of this world. Some are extremely ruthless, some went to the religious route, some are kind of somewhere in the middle, you know what I mean, doing whatever they need to do to survive. And so that was pretty cool. And this book was actually a pretty good treat, man. I didn't have any expectations for this one either. The cover didn't really do a whole lot for me. It looked pretty, run of the mill. It could go either way, honestly, with a title like that and a cover like that. But I'm telling you, the story and the artwork really sold me. So this was a really fun read. This was kind of a gem in the rough for me as well. So not a bad one. Check it out. The next Image book we read this week was Blood Tree from Tomasi. This is an Image Mad Ghost comic, and it's pretty much a detective style book right here. We have this mad guy in the background here. He's actually kidnapping some people and doing this kind of surgery to them, and then essentially sacrificing them in some kind of a way. And you understand a little bit more about that in this book. So it's kind of playing catch up, right? These detectives are out there, they're witnessing these murders, and they're suspected suicides until they learn a few more clues, and they start seeing it happen more and more in the similar fashion. So even with an explanation like that, it really doesn't give it justice, I don't think. Like the dialogue and the characters that are in here, dialogue is very buttery smooth, man. He has a really great way of just telling a story in a great pace, and bringing in new ideas and new pieces of the puzzle, new clues, things like that at the right time, kind of puts you in a day in the life of being one of these detectives in a situation like this. So I thought that was handled pretty well. Let me show you some of the artwork in here so you can get an idea of what that looks like. Pretty simple. I mean, it's a little sketchy, but it's pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of stuff going on. I mean, it's not like a big action thriller kind of a thing. It is a detective story. So there's a lot of just guys walking around, talking to witnesses, going to the, going to the morgues and stuff like that. And there's not a whole lot of like fighting or action scenes or anything like that just yet. We're being introduced to the characters and to the concept and to the problem right here. And so we're going to develop it as we go. So clearly, it being a number one, there's still a lot of puzzles and a lot of questions we have about, who the killer is, what's his motivation, is it a cult leader, what's going on, and we're going to explore more of that in the next issue, which that's a pretty cool, if that's a cover right there, that's a pretty cool cover for the next issue. So Blood Tree, interesting start. If you're in the detective books, murder mystery, serial killer kind of things, check this one out. The last book we read this week was from Kyle Stark's issue number 1 of Where Monsters Lie from Dark Horse Comics. And this book was great. This book was really, really great. It wasn't a book on my radar until I was watching Robbie, Pop Culture Philosophers, talk about his pick of the week. And this one made the pick of the week. So I had to go back and pick it up because it wasn't on my initial poll. But I'm so glad that I added it back on here. So very, very cool premise. First off, the cover is awesome. We basically have this, I don't know, maybe like a serial killer chilling in his in his kitchen right now, in his bathrobe, maybe drinking some coffee, and he's got some poor helpless dude chained up and being tortured right there in his living room. So I was like, that's pretty funny in itself. And the artwork is real gnarly and real detailed and kind of unsettling. And so that theme is played in here as well, but there's this like a ton of levity and just humor thrown on top of this too. We basically have this community, this gated community of all these psychos and serial killers, and they all have their weird little thing going on, right? So we have like a clown killer. We got some dude that has like some kind of sexual perversion. We got some mime lady who has like a puppet and things like that. And so we have all these crazy characters living in this gated community, kind of being governed by this little old lady who's extremely, to by the book, to the rule, follow the rules and by the book kind of stuff. And there's all this inner bickering, kind of like if you live in like the suburbs and you have an HOA or something like that. It's imagine that, but everybody around you is like a serial killer. And so it's actually really, really fun to see the interactions between all these characters. And so the basic conflict here is one of those people goes rogue a little bit and commits some kind of a murder within the community, and somebody escapes, right, and alerts the authorities. And so now they're going to have to deal with that in the upcoming issues as well. So here's a little bit more of that interior artwork. And I can just see this book going in so many interesting places, and it's just hilarious too. There's so many little subtle things in here that just go completely against like rational thinking, and it just turns out to be almost like a comedy, but at the same time it's horrifying at the same time. This is actually a really cool book, so if you have an opportunity to pick up Where Monsters Lie, I highly recommend this one. It was just hilarious, disturbing, and it was just a really fun ride. So check this one out for sure. All right, so like I said, a pretty small week. Hope you enjoyed that. If you did, go down below and hit that like button. And if you haven't subscribed yet, check that button out as well. But as always, let me know what books you got this week and what your favorite books of the week were. Once again, thank you for watching the video. I'll see you down below in the comments.